Hello, everybody. It's Stu Smith and Jeff Nichols here. We're with another Tactical Fitness Report. And this one has been a kind of in my inbox, I think yours too, about running programs. You know, you have to run to do any of these tactical professions, whether that is a fitness test or it is just to endure very challenging selection programs, you know, in the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force. I mean, there's a lot of running and rucking as well. So having a good foundation of running can be difficult to create for yourself. And where do you start? You know, so Jeff has a running program. I have a couple different running programs. Actually, Jeff has a couple of different running programs. I have a couple different running programs. And the answer is, once again, is it depends. Depends on how badly do you need to get better at running, right? For one.
And is it body type driven? Is it because, like, you know, former lineman, or is it
right.
you're really young and you haven't developed the nervous system to handle that capacity, or maybe you are just a different athlete, you know, like, again, we'll just say you're a tennis player, right? Because there's tons of agility, tons of
right.
power and speed, but not a lot of endurance.
Right.
So what type of runner were you in the sport or the lifestyle that you led will also determine that.
Yeah, I think a good question is to ask yourself, what do you consider long distance? You know, if you consider a 4-mile timed run long distance, you know, or even shorter, let's say 1.5 miles is considered long distance to you, you may be a power lifter, right? You may be somebody in that zone that just doesn't run at all. And so I would put you into a beginner running program, you know, and if you have a lot of who do you put on your running program, Jeff? Like with your 300 repeats that you do, the full sprint and all that. Yeah. What's the typical athlete that you would put on that one?
You know, here's the thing too, is I'll put anybody on it to start, but the directions outside of, like, if they get to it and it's too intense too often with the sprints, in the same way that too much distance would be a problem as well. I just say this, I go, what percentage, and it doesn't have to be exact, what percentage of your effort, or what's your effort level, or what effort level would you choose rather in those sprints to where you can maintain the 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 work to rest ratio. So if they can't, it says maximal effort for many of my things. But if I say, well, what if you just say, hey, today I'm going to set my governor at 80%. Can I maintain that 80? Then it gives you a much better idea of going, oh, okay. Like it's not, you know, running isn't just about distance and time, in the same way that swimming isn't just about distance and time. We actually have to pay attention to our effort level, because a lot of times I don't want guys training into failure.
Right. Anaerobic.
I want to challenge it, which is why there's rest periods of the 3-to-1s and 5-to-1s. Sure. So to answer your question very simply, anyone can, but just understand that you may not be ready for 100% effort yet. Like you may have to run those 6 weeks at 70% effort, 70, 75, and you get better and go, oh, my running got so much better, but I need to do more. Well, next time I go through, maybe I'm going to do Stu's program. And then you come back through and go into my interval and see, like, wow, Jeff's program and Stu's programs, these two took me from a 65 to an 82 in terms of optimal performance. But if I go back through, that's going to take me to 86, 95. You know, you got to look at training as a stair step.
Yes.
If it's too steep, right? If the steps are too high, you can't get to the next level.
Right.
So make smaller steps to get to that big step.
Yeah. And it also depends on what else you need to focus on too. You know, if you're, you know, we've done a series of podcasts before, you know, depending on, you know, what is your athletic background. You know, one of the biggest questions I ask people whenever they come join us, or I see them online, or they're just asking questions, is last week, how many miles did you run in that week? Right? If they tell me 8 miles, you know, single digit miles, you know, I'm not going to say you need to be on this 6-week running program that starts you off at 14 miles a week, right?
Yep.
Need to pull you back, maybe even start you on a beginner program and start introducing different types of running, like your type of running with full sprints and, building up that VO2 max engine that you have,
Yeah.
maybe one day of that. And, you don't want to do that every day. So let's try the next day of let's try some goal pace quarter miles. Because a lot of
Yes.
times
Yep.
I have
Yeah.
found something that really helps me and my guys is, let's run that quarter mile. But if you want a 9-minute mile and a half, that's a 6-minute mile. So let's learn how it feels to run a 90-second
Yes.
quarter mile.
Yes.
Do that over and over and over again,
Yep.
to 6, 8 times, and you start muscle memorying these paces. You get the heart rate ready for it, your stride, and then when you take the test, you can almost feel like, okay, I'm at a 6-minute mile pace, or, oh, I think maybe I'm at a 7-minute mile pace. I need to pick it up a notch,
Yep.
because how it feels when you're breathing and your arm swing and your stride, all that stuff comes together, so that is very valuable, I think, is to have some goal pace running in there, but also have some sprinting in there too, a couple of days, during the week. And if you want to, have another day in there that's just a long, slow, steady run, especially if you're a big guy that's trying to, drop some muscle mass. Because, we have guys that we train that are former, collegiate football players that, start off with us at 290. They drop down to 250, they drop down to 240, then they leave here and they head to Buds and they're about 215, 220. And that's light for them, and they feel really good at that weight, and they're running 6-minute, 7-minute mile pace for multiple miles now. But
Yep.
it was a very long journey. And when we started them off, it wasn't with, a lot of full sprint effort. It wasn't with high mileage. It was a progression, throughout the whole time. If they're with us for a year, I may start them off at, 6 miles a week, maybe, if that, mixed with some walking if they need to,
Yep.
depending on what it is. But then it progresses and builds up. So I think the biggest thing that Jeff and I try to do whenever we discuss different running programs, our running programs, is that it really does depend on how much you need to get better at running, right? What your goals are, and what have you been doing in the last several months. If you tell me that you haven't done any running for the last 6 months, chances are I put you on just about any running program, we're going to see overuse injuries really quickly within 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
So that has to be really monitored by us, and you have to listen to your body, because some days, we may say run for 35 minutes, but that run may need to turn into a bike or a swim, because your knees are all swollen, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. If our running is measured in time. Like you're like, yeah, Jeff, no kidding. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Right. But understand are we manipulating time when we run? No, we're not. We're manipulating physiology. So if we're not getting the time required, Stu's already given the answer, right? You have to train the body, like whatever those splits are, right? If you have to run a 9-minute whatever, if you dissect that in equal fourths or sixths or eighths, those are splits. Those splits are also not manipulating time. The human body is manipulating velocity.
Right.
So how do we get faster time? Do we get our time machine out? No. We manipulate acceleration and velocity. Well, how do we manipulate acceleration and velocity? We have to train the body to contract and relax at that given velocity. So how do we do that? If all you're doing is running great distances and your splits get slower and slower and slower, you're teaching yourself to run poor.
And
Same
slow.
token, if you're sprinting all the time, that trauma is so high, your body's going to get slower and slower because of the trauma. There's got to be a massage in between those two things, a little bit of intensity, a little bit of volume. Sometimes reach out there and get some distance, because here it is we're looking at time under tension. If your time under tension, like basically the training time in which you're working under contraction, has to be X to get Y, right? Y maybe being losing weight. Y might be run faster. Well, if X is really actually designed to run further, but you need to run faster, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
And that's the thing is if you're like, I'm putting all this work in, and it's not getting the result. Well, the input creates the output. If the training methodology is, you think in your head, I'm getting stronger, but it's not a strength training program, or it's like, need better running endurance, but I'm not getting any running endurance because I can't get the mileage needed because I'm too beat up, or I can't get the velocity. I can't accumulate. So it's not just like run faster. If it was that simple, all of us would be out of a job, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to listen to us. So in summary, folks, you get so fixated on the time of like, I got to do a mile and a half, so I better run mile and a half, run mile and a half. Well, the mile and a half is broken up in much smaller increments. And if you measure those increments, you'll see the point where you diminish. Like, let's say you go out running a mile and a half at a steady speed, but always at like 6 minutes, maybe you should train everything harder before that 6 minute breakdown. And now all of a sudden that 6 minutes becomes, you don't hit the wall until 7:15. You're like, whoa, nice. I didn't run any further.
Yep.
I just maximized my training on the front end to optimize that 6 minute mark, and then the 6:30 mark, and then the 8 minute. And all of a sudden now I'm out there running a 2 mile distance at a pace that I was hitting a wall at. And I'm running a greater distance in a faster time.
Yeah.
And it's not because I ran further.
Right. It is because you are getting in shape for that speed.
Yeah. Stu, the simple term is just build up to it, folks. If you've been running 6 weeks and wonder why your time hasn't dropped 6 minutes, the body's always changing, and you got to stay one step ahead of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, whenever you're doing a sprint workout, let's talk about like that energy system that is going to help us. We're working this energy system for what reason? To help us with this mile and a half or greater distances like 4 mile timed runs.
Yeah. So again, with the 3 energy systems, you have your phosphocreatine that lasts up to 11 seconds, maybe 9 seconds for the untrained. Then you go to the glycolytic, right? That some's going to say up to 3 minutes. Some will say up to 7. Some will say even further. Depends on the sport, activity.
Sure.
Athlete, so then
the
oxidative is infinite, kind of, right?
Right.
So, but you want to do them all. The phosphocreatine system, as far as a running endurance is concerned, it's actually fairly negligible just because you've expelled it so quickly anyway.
Right.
But then you have your glycolytic. That's a big training window. And it's not just like I want to extend my glycolytic window to 13 minutes. No, actually I just want the time that I'm in a glycolytic. It's very efficient, so I can quickly get an oxidative.
Yes.
Right? Through that Krebs cycle. Because if you're just out of shape, you never really even get into the oxidative.
Right.
So
that's a very good point because, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just to say, because the overall point for all of this is pretty simple, is what we're trying to do is increase the capacity of the mitochondria to transport oxygen. What does that mean? We just need to get the blood to transfer more oxygen to the lungs and then filter out the byproducts being creatine kinase and blood lactate. Simply, all right? Just trying to make the body consume oxygen at a better rate. Right. Well, if you just bypass glycolytic and all you ever do is just run great distances, you've omitted the primary mechanism to convert into the oxidative and have a tremendous amount of, it's like, you go for a mile run, you can pretty much sprint the damn thing. Why? No thanks to oxygen. It's really glycogen, right? Yeah. So as you extend that mile, it becomes far more imperative to be able to have a good oxidative system.
Right.
But you have to develop that middle portion.
So let's talk about that fuel. If you go into a PST, for instance, you just got through swimming really hard, right? You're going to burn a lot of your glycogen out during that swim, especially if you suck at swimming, right? And you're kind of muscling the swimming. Yep. Like if you're really good at swimming and you got a really good technique, you can probably save a lot of your glycogen, not really push it that hard, and still be at an 8:30, right? Especially if you can push it and swim a 7. Right.
That was me.
Yeah. Same here. You can really kind of conserve, because this is a strategy when you take this test. Last thing you want to do is blow it all out in the pool, because you still have, another 2/3 of the test to do. You got to pull up, push up, sit ups. That's all glycogen, right? You're burning all your blood sugar and glycogen in that set. And here's where people hit the wall right there in that last 10 minutes, before they transition for that mile and a half. They are feeling crappy.
Yep.
Take a sip of some Gatorade, some sugar, get some blood sugar in there, because you're going to need to go into that run in a glycolytic state at first. And then now, if you can have a certain amount of conditioning and you can push it into that oxidative state, that requires you to know your pace, can slow your heart rate down because you've done it so many times and you're in shape to handle this goal pace. That's why we like to say, let's do some goal pace training or tempo runs, right? Is to be able to maintain that pace at a lower heart rate. So therefore you can go into that oxidative state and kind of stay there, right? And then maybe if you got a little bit left on that last quarter, you can push it up, burn some blood sugar, and you're done.
For sure. And that's the idea of both are so complementary. They really are. Specifically being the oxidative and glycolytic. That's what I mean. They're so complementary because if the glycolytic stage is well developed, you've done a lot of metabolic work, you've done weight training, you're at a moderate body weight, and you're able to move, and you're athletic, you're going to have a fairly robust glycolytic state. You should.
Yeah.
Well, that really eases the oxidative. It makes that, it's like if you're unprepared on one aspect of those stages, it's going to be like a severe contrast path. Your body's going to go, and then it's got to get used to it.
Yes.
Right. But if you train that, okay, I'm prolonging this. It's like this easy temperature change, right? That's really what we want. And if you are experienced like hitting a wall within the PST, there is something going on. Now that's to say that like most everyone that does a PST all out, it's going to be tuckered out. And that's not what I'm saying.
Right. As
you're training for the PST, the things that you're doing, if you have this like, the perfect example is running and swimming. People, it's no fault of yours really. It's just there's such an emphasis on time and distance. So you say to somebody, hey, what'd you do for swimming? Yeah, I went and swam for 3 hours as hard as I could. That's effort, distance, and time. Has nothing to do with efficiency and stroke quality.
Right.
And that's a big problem. Same with running. So that's why I like to get people to start thinking, and I know you do as well, is just that, hey, if you're hitting a plateau, doing the same stuff or more of the same stuff you were doing before is typically not the answer.
Right. Recovery, rest, but also change it up. That's why Jeff and I have these different cycles, and it's when we talk about periodization, you don't need to worry about your run times per se, and how, trying to get faster at running. You may want to maintain your running pace, but you don't need to worry about trying to get faster at running when you're in a hypertrophy phase, or if you're in a strength building phase, right? Yep. What I would call my winter lifting phase.
Yep.
When we're in a winter lifting phase, we're at, single digits, running a week. That is all. We are focused on getting stronger and getting more powerful. For sure. Now we do some non-impact cardio in the pool, but it's mostly technique based, type.
Yeah. The reason, and probably yours is similar, the same, folks. The reason why I have little emphasis, or I have emphasis on it with like, you should still be doing some aerobic activity that's commensurate to whatever resistance training you're doing. Right. And what does that mean? It's like, the aerobic side should kind of look like the hypertrophy in that phase, right?
Yeah.
So my point is that the reason why you should still be doing some low impact cardiovascular work, or just cardiovascular work specifically during these phases, is because maintaining a good aerobic base will directly be beneficial for your recovery. Not just like when you're done training, we're talking the bouts of recovery in between your reps and sets.
Yep.
If you're really, really huffing and puffing and having a hard time, like maintaining a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio in a resistance environment, you need to put the weights down for a couple weeks and go hit the road, get the pool.
Yeah.
Like, you need to build your aerobic base,
right?
Because your anaerobic base is not buffering at a fast enough pace for you to maintain that volume. And that's where a lot of people then get hurt, or they just can't do the reps and sets. And they say, well, I'm not strong enough. No, you're plenty strong. You just actually don't have a good aerobic base.
Right.
You're not recovering in between sets.
Yeah, your muscle stamina is lacking.
You know, the first couple exercises, they're good. You know, they're not problems struggling with the reps and sets and a high volume workout. But at the end of the hypertrophy day, they're like, I can't even move. I'm just out of breath.
Yeah, really good test for us is that 5x5 cycle.
Yeah.
You do a 5x5. Hey, you're really good on sets 1 and 2, but then 3, 4, and 5, you can't hold a 75, 80% 1 rep max.
Yeah. And people say, oh, I'm just not strong enough. No. You're plenty strong.
Yeah.
Your aerobic base is crap. And that's why you can't recover in between these anaerobic sets. So you're strong.
Yeah.
You just are winded because of your lungs and your ability to transport oxygen.
I will tell you this, after our high rep calisthenic and running and swimming phase that we're doing now in the summer and kind of take it into early fall, when we start lifting again, it is almost boring to do a 5x5 workout.
Yeah,
I mean, one, we're not as strong as we were last winter. My 1 rep max probably has dropped by about 20%, maybe 30%. But doing a 5x5 with it is like, okay, what's next? It's there's a little transition, but that's not the goal of that phase.
Yeah.
The goal of that phase is to, let's slow it down a notch, not do all these repetitions that we've been doing for the last 3 months and all this high mileage. Let's slow it down, and now let's build some real strength and take the next 6 to 8 weeks building a strength base again, and you come back around. That's how you do this for long term. And when I was younger, I didn't do that. I tried to stay up here year after year after year in everything.
Yeah.
Tried to stay strong year round, tried to run year round. And then next thing I know, by 30, I am literally broken.
Right. I mean, if you folks really kind of pay attention to the big picture here, you realize, the way that Stu trains his guys, he's been doing it for over a decade. So that's not there's a big value in that, but understand the greatest value is the fact that Stu is training these guys that are younger than him for over a decade. He's still doing the same stuff, right? Each year, that cycle, you see what the cycle is keeping him healthy and happy and flexible and strong. It's cyclic.
Yeah.
You can't just lift heavy all the time. You can't just run far all the time. And that's why Stu and I keep saying, give yourself a year. Stu's been doing it for over a decade, folks. At any point in time in that decade, he could pass a PST. Why? Because it's a predictable cycle that the body gets strong, and then it heals, and it gets more endurance, and then it heals. You just keep going up.
Yeah. So you kind of maintain that base, and then, during the cycle, you're going to focus on your muscle endurance. So that'll go up. Your strength may go down a little bit, but that's okay. Then you go into the strength cycle. Your strength will go up. Your endurance will come down a little bit, but that's okay. You're going to come back into the running, and you start ramping that up again. So
if you do it when you're young enough, that's the thing, is like if Stu and Stu and I will throw ourselves under the bus. If I had been practicing what I preached at 18 and 19,
I didn't know about it.
Year. So like all these brackets that Stu has mentioned about one's a strength, gets better and it gets better. It's all of them. Every single year for like 12 years, you're going to get bigger, faster, and stronger every single year, even while you're on deployments, even while you're going through the stress. If you do it correctly for your entire time in the military or law enforcement or fire, from age 18 to 45, potentially, you can get bigger, faster, and stronger every one of those years outside of catastrophic injury, illness.
Right. So,
and Stu is a perfect example of this. He's not getting weaker and slower every year because he's getting older, right? And that's the thing too, is what we're trying to show you is like, you can be as capable in your 40s as I'm more capable in my almost 40s than I was in my 20s. And I'm not as big as I've ever been. I'm not as fast as I've ever been. I'm efficient. I'm super efficient. And it's not because I'm guessing. We just are actually finally practicing what we're preaching. And we're getting some of you to do it, and you're getting fantastic results. And we're just sharing with you like hey, don't do this. We totally screwed this up. We're just kind of putting the frosting of, hey, you should do this.
Well, you
These
know
are
what? Yeah, here's the thing. I see it all the time. You know that over prepared one that we did just the other day, over prepared for training. That was me a little bit. I would say that I was an 18-year-old kid that used to lift, used to want to play football. I didn't make the football team. I moved it over to rugby. That changed a little bit more running. So I kind of started getting in better running shape, right? But I still lifted, to play rugby. And then I was like, this SEAL thing's pretty cool. Let me see if I can do that. And then that whole thing changed and I went nuts with that. I dropped the weights and tried to get better at running because I knew I sucked at running, right?
Yep.
And so that was a process over a couple of years. And then, you go through BUDS, you go through the team. And back when I was in, there was no human performance program. I mean,
Right.
It was my high school football team had a better human performance program than the Navy SEAL program did.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just what it was, but now it's world class. You're going to actually get to the team and they are going to be able to take care of you and make a great tactical athlete out of you. And keep you operational for as long as you can, barring any, major accidents, injuries, or illnesses.
For you stubborn folks out there, just know the training. Listen, if nothing I say in this message, this whole podcast is meaningless, but this is the one. Understand that all the training you're doing to prepare yourself for BUDS, if you intend on continuing to do that when you're in the teams, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You are so wrong. Yeah. You are not a high intensity interval ninja in the teams. What Stu and I are talking about, the cyclic training, is even more important when you're active duty. This conversation about prepping for BUDS and other special forces, when I'm encountered with that conversation, now with guys, I'm like, whoa, no, you're not a BUDS student anymore. Stop treating your student. BUDS is not a training program. Yeah. BUDS is a selection program to deselect, not to make you physically fit. That's not what it's for.
Right.
That stuff comes after.
Yeah, it's like our old podcast when we first started. We did the 2 through and after, the 3 phases of tactical fitness, right? Got to get to the training by passing the test. You got to get through the training by mastering the selection program and all the little elements of that. And then afterwards, there's a whole gamut of new stuff that you need to do. Maintaining your job. You're going to be older than you are younger, in this phase, so you got to start working on longevity and mobility work and stress mitigation. That's probably one of the biggest. Your recovery is critical,
Become a student.
For your sanity.
Become an expert, not just in the tactic, because that's the really cool thing. One of the many, many, many really cool things about the community is that you will become an expert in your own right in some aspect of that job. You might become a real expert in shooting, like we're all pretty good shooters, but you might become a real expert, explosives and parachute, whatever it may be. Yep. Well, now you guys are in a position where the human performance, the POTFF, it's called the preservation of the force, that sort of initiative is a known quantity. You can take part in that now. You guys all now are really, you're the catalyst for its development, because now, like, it's becoming a pandemic, so much so, like, that the Army, the 3-star, 4-star, like, non-joint chief, but I forget who it is. I was not Abrams. Maybe it is Abrams. General Abrams. So General 4-star Abrams. His initiative before retirement was the POTFF, and it was like, right, we got to get all these men and women healthy, because they're saying, I think it's like, I don't want to misquote, it's either 17 or 27. One of those numbers stand on my head. That's the percentage of the U.S. military that is non-deployable because of injury. No. Wow. It's 17% of deployable sources are deployable units can't 70%. They can't fill 17% of that deployable. Hey, it's like they say, you're supposed to have 100 people to deploy, right?
Right.
And the average across the military for all the deployable units, I think 17% of each one of those can't deploy just because of non-combat related injuries.
Wow.
That's in some of those units, that's like, you can't deploy.
Yeah.
So they're overtasking other units because they're pulling to augment. And it's this big perpetual machine. And the guy and the men and women that are staying healthy, now as a byproduct of their success of staying healthy, they got to work more because other people can't stay healthy. And it's becoming a big, big problem with armies. Like, hey, if this path continues, we won't be able to deploy anybody.
Right.
Because everyone's going to be overtaxed.
It's a really good point. And, it's funny that you bring this up because we're kind of going full circle here. We started about running programs, right? But now we're going into a lot of the injury rates and, trying to stay healthy for long term. Well, you know what? Running will make you injured.
Yeah.
It literally will. I mean,
yeah.
What is the statistic every year? I mean, I've been reading this for decades. Over half of all runners get injured every year.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is like world-class type level runners, I mean, it could be a minor injury. It can be a major injury, whatever. It can be a soft tissue. It can be a stress fracture, whatever. But, runners get injured. So you have to really be smart with how you're going to implement running programs.
Right.
Whether that is, Jeff's 300-meter sprint and recovery cycle, to build up your VO2 max and ability to buffer lactate, right, quickly. That's going to get you in better shape to be able to do it a little bit further, and now turn those 300s into 400s and half-mile repeats and mile repeats. And then next thing you know, you're crushing the 1.5 miles, right? And then eventually, that 1.5 miles is going to have to turn into a 4-mile timed run. Right. And that's a different level of mileage. I particularly like to recommend guys to run a little higher mileage, depending on who they are. Right. If they are a non-running athlete, somebody that's not a cross-country guy or something like that. If it's a cross-country guy, I'm saying don't even worry about running. Let's go in the weight room because you're going to get crushed under a log in a boat. Right. If you're a powerlifting football player, whatever, you need to start running now. And keep running and have a good foundation of running. Now that means a progressive foundation of running week after week after week, of progression, not just, distance to do distance, so, Jeff and I were making comments over before this and even in other podcasts about, what is the right number of miles before, you get out to buds per week? What should you be capable of doing? The buds command recommends 40. I think that once again, it depends, it depends on the athlete. Jeff, prefers a lot lower than that, but working on speed and working on your, force production to maintain that, because there is something said about not being burned out when you get to buds. You can be really burned out by running, building yourself up to 40 miles and not really being a runner to handle that. And then 40 miles is your breaking point.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're going to start buds almost broken. Right. I recommend people to do that kind of mileage if they're that kind of athlete that needs it.
Yep.
I would, but it's with a caveat. Right. It's a caveat where there might be a long run scheduled that day where you can turn it into a ruck if you want, or you can turn it into a non-impact cardio activity for an hour. It just depends, and you got to listen to yourself. I don't get too wrapped around the axle about saying, hey, I got to get 40 miles this week because that's what everybody's doing. That's what everybody says,
Right.
Be able to run your 4 miles in 7-minute mile pace and you're going to be fine.
Yes.
So
the thing too is, folks, is like, why do we run? There's 2 reasons why we run. Fit from a standpoint of sport. You have to improve the impact in the transfer of energy through the legs. Well, that's a limiting factor. It's leg strength, leg endurance, whatever it is. Like, it's body, it's fit, muscle skeletal. The other one is cardiovascular training. That's what people, it's running is cardio. Yep. Okay. Well, that's heart driven.
Yes.
Heart. It's not leg driven. It's not arm driven. But the beauty is all of those drive that heart to go up or go down. You can do cardiovascular work in a multitude of things. Don't just single yourself into running, because if you do a good, moderate, high intensity interval training in the weight room, it's also cardio. But that's, you go from that and you maybe go for a little bit run afterwards to extend that cardiovascular window. So think of it, and I don't mean to just bring this up. This is how it works in my head. Running, like let's say you run every single day as hard as you can, 5 miles. That would be extremely difficult for the human body, regardless of level, because I'm saying running it as hard as possible.
Right.
That's what a lot of people do. They go run as hard as they can for whatever distance and time. Well, equate that to the weightlifting. Let's put weight on a bench press. Bench as heavy as you can, 5 days in a row, 6 days in a row, or not even as heavy. Go, well, let's put your 65% on there and do 6 sets, 8 sets, whatever, what's kind of equated to that run that you're going to do.
Right.
Maximal reps for maximal sets. Well, come Wednesday, you'll be like, I can't even move my damn arms.
Yeah.
My chest is killing me. My back is killing me. So running is a mechanism to improve X, Y, and Z. So is pressing a barbell in this fashion. But you understand if you do too much of any one of them, it's very clear what's going to happen, except for a lot of times in runners, they go, I don't know why my legs are killing me. Well, when's the last time you took time off?
Yeah.
Or
When you run 7 days a week.
They're like, I don't know why I'm not getting better at running. Like, well, how often you're running? Twice a week. Well, you're right, because you're only running twice a week. So it's like, not everyone can say here, you can't just take, and even my program is Stu's, anyone's. Yeah. That's the problem with online programming. Maybe at best it's an 80% solution.
Yes.
But when you're in person with somebody, you could have these conversations, and that's why Stu and I do this.
Yeah.
So that's my last input I have in running. Just think about it, folks. Just think.
Listen to your body. When you're feeling it, do a mobility day instead of running at all. Get on a bike, foam roll, stretch, car buffer, all those things. Right? We do those once a week now.
The beautiful thing about buds, last I checked, the beautiful thing about buds, one of them is that you have to be in the water. So you mean I can get in the pool, do some technique work and down regulate and not beat myself up, but still put good work in? Because you can't really do that with jogging.
No.
Like you're like, hey, I want to put some cardio in, but I've been putting a lot of miles. I'm going to go to a slow jog. Nope, not a good idea.
Yeah,
it doesn't hurt. But you put somebody in the pool, a lot of times you go, hey, man, slow down.
Yeah.
Work on some
all I know is I walk out, of a swimming workout or maybe a non-impact mobility day workout, and I actually feel no pain going into my car when I'm driving home. I do that with a run, walking out to my car, I'm limping, my feet hurt, my knees hurt, all these little things. Even if I've stretched out a little bit, it has its way of beating you down. So, you do have to personalize any running program that you get, to make sure you're listening to your body. So I think my 2 cents is that, there's no personalized program in a downloadable program or a book or an online article. You're going to have to personalize it to fit your capabilities and your goals.
Right. Yeah. It's the thing with this, with training, oftentimes really, maybe we just, if you're really paying attention, you can see it, but with a lot of miles that's been run or a lot of weight training that happens, when you fall down and hit your knee, it's scraped. You get scraped. It's visible. It bleeds. It's bleeding. There's been damage to the skin. Well, here's the deal. That's what happens to the muscle. It bleeds. It tears. It breaks down. Well, if you keep picking the scab on your knee, it's going to get infected. It takes forever to heal. Yeah. Same thing. If your muscles are beat up and you just keep putting more and more stress to it, we'll wonder why it eventually it's just like, equivalent to the infection of a scab knee. It gets worse.
Yeah.
Injury. That's what happens. You get injured. Doesn't just hurt. You get injured.
Yeah.
And then it really sets you back.
Then it comes chronic, and then you got to lay off running for, over a month.
Weeks, months. Like my sister, she overdid it. Told her don't. Right. She fractured the head of her femur. She was training for her 4th Ironman, and I'm like, stop.
Yeah, that's gonna take a while.
Like I told you should have been in the water. You don't need the miles.
Water and bike. I tell you one thing. One time I got injured, and I was really worried about my mild pace falling apart. And I actually, after 3 weeks of not running, all I did was bike and row, right, and swim. Right, so bike, row, and swim, and my run time actually came back faster because I was doing pyramids on the bike with high resistance stuff.
Cross training, beautiful thing.
Fast. I was working long, slow distance. steady pace stuff, and actually came back faster. And, gave my joints some time to heal, in that.
From a higher impact activity. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you can still have a high force contraction, but if you limit some of the impact, it's an option.
Yeah. And
It's a
I
good
felt like my
option.
legs were recovering every
Yep.
day.
And it's the next best option, because then if you're like, I'm still not getting relief, I still have a high force contraction in the muscle surrounding that sore area. Well, now you just go take the force contraction slower, walk,
Yeah.
swim, right? Keep the mass down, right? And as you're like, oh, that feels pretty good, right? What do? We increase the distance, time, or velocity just a little bit. You go, ooh, yep, it's pretty good. Next step, which one? Intensity, velocity, magnitude, whatever. Like, whoop, okay. And then before we know, we're like, oh, I'm completely healed. I just kept adding something, and now I'm back right away. 3 weeks later, I'm back to normal. Rather than at 6 weeks, you're just starting from scratch because you had to take 2.5 months off because you have a hairline fracture in your femur.
Right.
Now we're starting over.
Yeah, that sucks.
So don't like that's a tough one, because the mentality is like go hard, go like hell. That's the test.
Yeah. The selection is going to ask you to do that every day.
Yeah. Yep, that's the test.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
We don't always have to test with great intensity. We want to get in there and kick you in the butt a couple times. We do. It's good for you, but not every day.
Right. Very good. Very good. So running programs, we have discussed it.
Yep. So I was like selecting your run program for buds.
Yeah.
Something like that. That's what we're kind of talking about.
This is a good one. This is a very commonly asked question. So I'm glad we're able to spend a little time on it, because it is confusing. I understand why people ask this question, because it is a confusing, and it's a lot to understand.
There's a lot of variables you really should be taking into account. And that's my point, is just,
I agree.
Look at it from a big picture, make changes, evaluate the changes, see if see when you make those changes, did it get better, worse, no better?
Yeah.
And stick with it for a week or two. Better, worse, no better. All right.
Cool. All right, Jeff, until next time, my friend.
All right, brother. We'll see you again. Thank you.
We'll see you.